Welcome to the presentation, Where's My Invoice Payment? My name is Amy Duncan. I'm an Accounts Payable researcher in Accounts Payable, and I'm excited to be presenting this presentation on how to locate and find invoice payments. First off, we have our Accounts Payable Invoice Processing team, and these are going to be the folks that you're going to want to talk to if you have questions on where your invoice is or you can't locate a payment in the system. As an overview, we're going to talk about first Invoice Timeline, showing where your invoice goes when it gets to Accounts Payable. We're also going to discuss some reasons that might be causing you to ask the question, where's my invoice? And then we're also going to discuss new things happening in Accounts Payable. So first off, we have an invoice timeline. This is a real high-level look at what happens to your invoice when it comes into Accounts Payable. Your invoices are date and time stamped. They are then put into an AP inbox, and once an invoice processor takes them and enters them into the system, they will be set to pay usually from 30 days from the invoice date, unless the payment terms state otherwise. And for those that may not know what payment terms mean, that's basically how long it will take for an invoice to pay. So this entire process takes roughly about 3 to 5 days for the invoice to cycle through. Here are 6 reasons why your invoice may not be entered in the system or the invoice has not yet been paid. And we're going to take each of these and break them out and discuss them in more detail. First, has it been at least 5 business days? This is important because if you remember in the timeline, we want to make sure that we are giving the invoice enough time to go through the AP process. So if you drop something off today, it most likely will not show up in the system the following day. So in some cases, we have special instructions for an invoice, and this leads me to our next slide. Is it a rush payment? So these are critical payments that are going to be actually put to the front of the line of invoices that need to be processed. And we identify these when it says rush at the top in red. It's very important to do that so we know to process that payment right away. And also as a note, we want to emphasize that these kind of invoices that are stamped rush are really the exception to the rule on how we process. So please, when submitting your invoices, don't stamp everything rush. Next, is the payment term 30 days? So whenever you're setting up an invoice in the system, you'll notice under payment terms a variety of options. And payment terms are set up in 3 different places. Initially, when the supplier is set up, our group in procurement may set the payment terms to the 30 days. Also, when the requisition is created, you can make a note to the buyer in a box that you see as a requisitioner to go ahead and change the payment terms to perhaps pay immediately if you need this particular invoice or purchase order to go through right away. And then the third place is in Accounts Payable. We can also override the payment terms. So this is important to understand because just because your invoice is entered in Oracle, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be paid right away. You need to double check the payment terms. And if you have any questions on those, please feel free to contact AP. Next, is the receipt entered in the system? So Oracle works on a 3-way match system where the amount that is on the invoice and entered in AP needs to match what the PO was set up for, and it also needs to match what you as the requisitioner receive in the system. So if one of these pieces is missing, the payment will not go out. The system will hold it. So please be sure that you've gone to the receiving tab, and you see here on the slide there's a sample of what that screen looks like, and make sure that you've received all those items in the system, and then payment could be released. Next, this is very helpful, especially for new requisitioners, on 6 must-haves. These are the absolute minimum requirements to get an invoice processed within accounts payable. So if you're missing one of these things, there's a good chance that your invoice is going to be kicked out, rejected, or sent back to you. Did the supplier have an error? This is also something that you not necessarily would know as a requisitioner, but we discover usually when entering the invoice into Oracle. And if that's the case, one of the accounts payable researchers will pull that invoice aside and go ahead and work with the vendor to get that resolved. An example of that could be if the sales tax is wrong. We don't see that until we enter the invoice. And if that's the case, we work with the vendor to get a revised invoice, and then we go ahead and process it as soon as possible. So another important tip to remember is the AP inquiry tool. And this is very helpful and useful when you're looking up things by the invoice number, for example. Both iProcurement and this inquiry tool can give similar information, but the inquiry tool can give you specific information that iProcurement cannot. So it's good to go ahead and know how to use it and be able to track your invoices. So first off, you want to make sure that you actually have the inquiry tool to use. And you should see in your list of responsibilities here, AP inquiry, which is highlighted. If you do not have this function, please see your supervisor so that they can make sure it's added to your list of responsibilities. So once you click on the AP inquiry folder, it'll bring up this screen here for invoice inquiry. So we're going to go ahead and click that. And then you'll go ahead and open up the window. And next, go ahead and click invoices. Open up the window, and this will bring you to a Find Invoices screen. And here is where you can locate a lot of different information. For example, we talked about finding an invoice number, which would be right here. So you can go ahead and enter that invoice number, and you can hit Find, and then it will go ahead up and bring you any invoice under that specific invoice number. This is particularly helpful in preventing duplicate POs, because if you see that the invoice is already set up under a different PO, it will keep you from creating another PO and another requisition. And then we have 2 POs for the same invoice. So this is an example where this inquiry tool can be very helpful. If you need to know more about how to use it more effectively, please contact someone in accounts payable and we'd be happy to show you how to use it. So some things to remember in accounts payable. First, we have in our procurement and payables website our accounts payable section of that website. It's very useful and can give you lots of tips such as the 6 must-haves, our contact information, email addresses, and other things. We do also recommend sending vendors to this website also because it can be very useful. Also, we have our new shared inbox at central.ap at kingcounty.gov, and this is again a very helpful email address to give out to your suppliers or to use yourself. Perhaps you have a question about a past due invoice. The vendor wants to send some information to AP. We ask that you please use this email address because it is looked at by more than one person, so it can also reduce your efforts in trying to go around different people in AP and find somebody. If you send it to the central AP, it will be looked at and you will get a response pretty quickly. Next, we also have our what are known as our blue forms, invoice correction forms. These are mailed to you now electronically. They are not sent inter-office mail. The only time that you will receive hard copies of these is if we have an error on an invoice. We will send an email to you with an invoice correction form and an attachment of the actual invoice. and then you will have 5 days to get back to us. If we don't hear from you, then we will go ahead and send a form, which is blue, in an interoffice mail, and then you'll be responsible for following up on it after. We also have the addition of AP researchers to our staff. So these AP researchers, which is myself and also Nichelle Carter, we go ahead and we take invoices that cannot be processed and go ahead and look at them and try to figure out the problems. And this has really helped expedite other invoices that do not have any errors to move freely through the process and get paid as soon as possible. And then finally, we have Procurement 101 training. If you have not taken it already, we highly encourage you to take it. If it's been a while since you've taken it, it can be a very good refresher training to take. There's lots of helpful information in there, not just on the procurement process, but that relates to accounts payable as well. So we encourage you to contact us if you have any questions at our central.ap website. We thank you for viewing this presentation, and we hope that this has been helpful and answered your questions.